Hey, what's up? This is Dr. Taylor Krick, the Washington Wellness Center. I do a YouTube channel separate where I review studies from the scientific literature, and this is a really good one, but I'm going to give the short version here. So if you want the long version, you can find that on my other channel. I'm going to give the short version. This study, it just came out. It's brand new. It's from 2021. It's in the journal Oxidative Medicine and Cellular Longevity. And in this video, I'm going to be short, and I'm just going to look at some of the pictures, but it's about mycotoxins, which are mold toxins. And this study says food origin, mycotoxin-induced neurotoxicity. So that means mycotoxin-induced neurotoxicity. You might be getting it from food, which comes in cereals, grains are the highest, coffee, wine, anything that's stored in bulk, nuts, seeds. But this study's on food origin mycotoxins, but you could get them also from water damaged buildings or even from airborne mycotoxins, from farming and from the harvest and things like that. But water damaged buildings is a major source of mycotoxins. But food origin mycotoxin induced neurotoxicity intend to break the rules of neuroglial cells. So I got really excited by this title, but I could also tell that it was not written by people with English as their first language. So all these researchers are out of China, and they're agricultural researchers because a lot of this literature comes out of the ag world because a lot of these are found in feed for animals. And then animals get these neurotoxic diseases. So I'm going to skim a lot of this, but basically the whole point of this paper is showing how there's all this literature, and a lot of it says it's within the last decade, how mold toxins affect the brain in a major way. So it's long, and it goes through all this. I won't get too hung up on a lot of this, but here it says mycotoxins have been demonstrated to increase the occurrence of global neurologic diseases. They talk about how it's been associated with, in this study, these people had their neurodevelopment was hindered, their exercise balance, visual function, reaction speed, cognitive ability, and emotional management were all weakened as their mycotoxin levels got higher. And there's another one that talks about a study done in 277 children in Poland that over 6 years, the time of exposure to mold was negatively related to the IQ of the participants. So basically, the longer that they lived in mold, the dumber that they got, or their IQ got lower. And they talk about all these things based on the characteristics of these mycotoxins and their easy passage through the blood-brain barrier and their potential threat to the central nervous system. Exploring these connections is becoming more urgent for us. Ochratoxin, here's another one. We measure this one often. We measure it often in kids. It's the most common one that we find. And we see a lot of dopamine issues. We see a lot of low motivation, a lot of OCD, ADHD. Ochratoxin is a neurotoxin that has a high affinity with the brain. And mice treated with ochratoxin showed acute depletion of dopamine in metabolites. Ochratoxin also caused male-specific autism by combining these things. So anyway, it goes on to talk about this. So let's look at some of these pictures real quick. So what this is saying is that mycotoxins are in food. The animals eat the food. We eat the animals and we eat the food. So we're getting it from all of these sources. And again, that's not taking into account indoor air pollution and mycotoxins from mold. But they're going to get in. They're going to cross the blood-brain barrier. They're going to infect astrocytes. They're going to infect microglial cells. They're going to cause neuron damage, brain damage, and that's associated with inflammation, cerebrovascular diseases, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Huntington's, persistent dystonia, ALS, and MS. And again, if you want the long version, watch my other video. That's what this entire study is going through and confirming and proving is how that happens. Again, I'm not going to go through all the things that you can even see through the highlighted stuff. There's a lot to this. There's a few more studies. This one's saying that it damages and impacts mitochondria. Mitochondria produce all of your body's energy. You have about 8,000 of them per brain cell. So if they're damaged, or you get DNA damage, or you get these inflammatory pathways, your environment's contaminated with mycotoxins, it's going to affect your brain. Let's just keep going. Mycotoxin mediated microglia activation. That's what happens like if you get a TBI and you get neuroinflammation, it activates microglia, and mycotoxins do that. Again, I'll try not to read too much because I'll just go to the pictures. But oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, all this stuff happens, all this stuff happens, all this stuff happens, all this stuff happens. Now there's more pictures. Activated microglial cells, they're necessary, essential for neuroinflammation. Let me keep going. Here we go. So mycotoxins at a sublethal dose. So let's say you have them in your basement. Let's say you have them in your crawl space. Let's say you have them in your gut or your sinuses. They're going to activate microglial and astrocytes. Astrocytes regulate the blood-brain barrier. That's going to turn on all these mechanisms and all these pro-inflammatory pathways that basically cause cell death in the brain. I'm doing the short version. That it doesn't really need to be much longer than that. That is the gist of it, and that is 100% what this paper shows. Then lastly, let's look at anxiety, because again, a lot of these things lead to Alzheimer's, MS, neurodegenerative diseases, cognitive decline, dementia, things like that. But anxiety affects so many people, brain fog and anxiety. And so the next one says failure of glutamate clearance in glial cells. Glutamate is excitatory, and when it accumulates, it excites brain cells. Mycotoxins inhibit glutamate clearance in glial cells. As glutamate accumulates, it's like, I can't take one more like kid screaming or one more one more noise, or like my brain's gonna explode, and you get a lot of anxiety and you get a lot of like, oh my gosh, I'm frazzled. And the opposite side of the glutamate coin is GABA. So there's other things that can affect this too. Autoimmunity against GAD65, enzyme, other things, even like aspartame and artificial sweeteners can affect this. But mycotoxin-mediated astrocyte injury inhibits glutamate uptake and leads to a large accumulation of extracellular glutamate, which eventually induces excitotoxicity, functional impairment, or death of nerve cells. So, and then here's another picture that just shows that these things get in there, the mycotoxin in the brain, they jack up all these pathways, the glutamate-glutamine cycle, the glutamate clearance, the ATP depletion, the calcium overload, DNA damage, cell arrest cycle, apoptosis, inflammation, not good for your brain. So my audio kind of crapped out. But we see some of these cases. We see kids with ADHD, we see OCD, we see a ton of anxiety, brain fog, and it often correlates with somebody's history of like, oh yeah, I lived for 6 years in this moldy house, or it all started in 2015 when I moved and we did a lot of renovation and we tore up a lot of carpet and stuff, or and not as the sole exclusive contributor, but oh yeah, I also got a TBI, and I also had these other things that correlated. But we often see that mold exposure is associated with these neuro things, with dopamine imbalances, with anxiety, with just weird neuro things. So anyway, that's why I was super psyched by this study, because it confirms and it explains a lot of the mechanisms from the things that we see often clinically when we're trying to help people through these neurotoxic issues, solving the neurotoxic puzzle.